While you are approaching your chairs, I'm just going to introduce myself. You're going to see me twice here. Lucky you. I'm here to chair 3 people, including a bonus replacement person, which is always exciting. I have an interest in what we are up to here on the basis that I've been delivering conversational AI systems for over 25 years. I built my first one in 1982 on a ZX Spectrum. So I'm sort of that kind of shape and size of geekery. I'll show you some other bits and bobs later on, but just to frame what it is that we're doing here, we have 3 people in this session. Adrian Byrne and Jill Winters is unfortunately unwell, so won't be attending. So we have Hamza Qadri, who has stepped in to talk, and Max Hughes is going to be wrapping us up. Now, when I was chatting to Jill before this event, and she was describing these 3, or the 3 of them, she described them as deep geeks. And I thought that that very much fitted with the sort of feeling of us as a group of people here. I love this conference because it's very much no sort of BS bingo anywhere. It's very much about people that are trying to do real things in a real sensible fashion. So I ended up with a slide, which I don't have to hand, which was one ring. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Yeah. Which I thought was an appropriate way to shake everybody after lunch. And then I decided that one slide to set the scene, one slide for fun now, one slide to lift from lunch to early afternoon, and then I ran out of any kind of rhyming slang. But the image was of Max Headroom and Anna Nova. Now, Max Headroom was 1987-88, yeah? And was a character. Talk is cheap, delivery isn't. That's what we're talking about here in these 3 sections. And the Max Headroom piece generated a lot of interest from me as a teenager, I suppose, back in those days, maybe a little older. And it was, is it real or not? And it's very relevant to where we are today, particularly in digital health. You know, is it real or not? And Anna Nova in 2000 was sold for 95 million, but there was no editor. There was no ability to edit the content at all. And it lasted a few years, and then that 95 million, which was quite a lot, was swept under the bridges, which is the way that things go. So, there we go. So what I like about the line here is that I found from 2000 a reference from the CEO who talked about Orange's plans, jade tressed lovely. And it takes me back to the 1970s and everything that was wrong about it. You know, it's like jade tressed lovely. Anyhow, let's move on to something which is a bit more appropriate. Let's move towards our first presenter of today, and it is Adrian Byrne, who's going to be talking about the Wired West, plugged in, digitized, and running on algorithms instead of horses. Adrian is a serious player. He's done very serious stuff, and I'm really interested to see how he's going to attack this. The floor is yours, Mr. Byrne.
So am I. Especially as I've lost my notes as I've just walked up there. Doesn't matter. Right. That is weird. I was looking at them a second ago. Bear with me 2 seconds, guys. Right. I put some notes up because I need to stick to time, and I'll just sort of meander all over the place if I don't. So, hi, I'm Adrian Byrne. I'm an ex-Chief Information Officer at University Hospital Southampton for quite a long time. I think I was probably the longest serving CIO in the country at one point, at least in acute hospital. So this slide, where is my slide? Working, good, right, okay. So this slide has a reference on it, and all of my cultural references are hopelessly outdated, which was one of the reasons I had to leave, actually, the trust. I was working with a PA who couldn't even remember The Office, and I make so many references to things that have been on the TV It was just a waste of time. We couldn't kind of communicate anymore. So that reference there, The Simpsons, I've used the monorail episode of The Simpsons to describe IT business cases, various IT business cases for many years. So if you haven't seen the episode, it will be lost on you, so I apologise for that. Go and watch it, it's quite funny. In Southampton, when I was there, we ran the Hampshire Health Record. It was quite a famous early shared care record, actually. We used to go and talk about it a lot. They've changed the technology now, it doesn't get spoken about as much, but it was one of the early ones. We were a GDE as an acute trust in Southampton, Global Digital Exemplar Programme, 16 to 19. We had a fully web-based EPR, actually, back in 2005. So it kind of amuses me to look at some of the things people are actually buying these days. We ran a personal health record, end-to-end, messaging, everything, 12 years ago. So we did some pretty groundbreaking things, actually, in Hampshire and in Southampton when I was there, I think. On our PHR programme, we used to talk about this a lot as well. I haven't spoken about it for a long time. But one of the things we highlighted was that many outpatient appointments in your hospital only exist to remind the doctor to look in your notes. I mean, that's quite shocking, but it's true. The point I'd really like to make on that, though, is what is there in terms of systems that helps the doctor or the nurse to look in your notes if the patient doesn't turn up? In other words, if there's no appointment, what is the trigger? The answer to that actually is largely nothing, because the systems are not set up to do it. So we're giving access to patients, for example, to their results in all kinds of ways now, but we're not setting up the background processes to support what's actually going on. In reality, I think as a professional community, call ourselves professionals, don't we, though we're not a profession, as a professional community, we've at least partly failed to do what was expected of us, actually. That's what I believe. I think we're conscripted, largely conscripted, to deliver that monorail business case, but we've delivered largely unpopular systems that don't support users or patients. So, in a way, it's a kind of a sad tale, I suppose. So the room will have seen this drawing before. I assume many people will have seen this diagram drawing. It was drawn by a child patient of, I know Dr. Bob Watts spoke about it in his book, Digital Doctor. So if you've read The Digital Doctor, you'll certainly have seen this. The story here is that my mum actually went to a doctor recently, went to the eye doctor. She's got AMD. And when she came back, she said, the doctor didn't look at me, wasn't interested, spent his time looking at a computer. I thought, I've heard this before. So we've kind of turned doctors into data entry clerks, in my view, instead of helping them to do their jobs more safely and efficiently. Many of our systems slow them down and frustrate them. There's some terrible design out there. If you look at the class reviews, you'll see a very mixed picture, even on the same system. So there's terrible design, there's terrible build, there's terrible training, etc. So it's a mixed picture. Some people are satisfied, some people aren't. It now seems that we're actually relying on yet another technology. Everyone's putting faith in ambient voice, AVT, to come and save the day. But that feels like a little bit like RPA on speed to me, sometimes, to be honest. Maybe it will be successful, I don't know. But there is a saying that you can't put glitter on a turd. So let's see. Is that worth 200 million? I don't know. Yeah, what about now? Yeah, well, you know, I think so. I think most people in the room would buy that if it's got Gen AI with glitter on top of a turd. You'd all buy it. So I think we paid lip service to the open data term, actually. Another outdated cultural reference, open data, my arse. We've talked about open data as if it was a guiding principle, but in reality, it's been a hollow slogan. Commercial interests and a lack of commitment in strategy and procurement have left the NHS at the mercy of the market rather than in control of it. Here's an example. We have let the market destroy the vision of vendor-neutral archive. You know, if you'd spoken to anyone 15 years ago, they'd have said all PACS systems are going to be on a vendor-neutral archive. You don't see many vendor-neutral archives in actual operation. There's a few players still in the market. Generally now you'll see enterprise archives where they can take images in, but none of them, hardly any of them, are vendor-neutral. So we allowed the market to destroy that. The clinical data repository, alongside the electronic medical record, is one of the easiest things to take out your business cases early on. I think that does happen. So we end up beholden to a supplier that's holding all of our data. And actually, I think this is going to continue as vendors lock us in to cloud solutions. So we have to be cognizant of that and do something about it. Minutes. Oh, okay. I was enjoying myself. System satisfaction 101. If you're paying people to incentivize use of the system, you have failed 100%. I think we've done a lot of that. I think people are aware of programs like Choose and Book. We've paid lip service to user-centered design. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about in my 2 minutes is just a plug actually for this talk, because actually, rather than listening to me for 10 minutes, you can go and look at Bill Gurley's talk. There's a link in my presentation. It talks about regulatory capture. It's a story about money. It's a story about how the market will dictate the terms unless you drive the market. Regulatory capture is a particular interest. I know, Joe, you've spoken about it a bit, and it's in your book. George Stigler, 1982 Nobel Prize for Economics. As a rule, regulations are acquired by the industry and designed for their benefit. There's a piece about the innovator's dilemma in there, which is a brick wall to innovation that is built by suppliers if you let them. As time goes on, everything becomes, I nicked this off Joe as well, but like the Mir space station, unsustainable, and we need to be aware that there's a conflict between modular systems and monolithic systems. The national program was all about monolithic systems. Wasn't meant to be originally, but they did build that. People may remember Extormity Inc. from 2011. They were kind of a parody of a monolithic system supplier. It was quite an amusing website for a time, but there's not much about it right now. But it would seem, I would say, one of the kind of nuggets of information that I have over the years is a Goldilocks size for absolutely everything. It doesn't have to be monolithic, but it has to be the right size and at the right level to do interfacing with it. So just wondering how much of my talk I can go into really now. But there's a recurring temptation to believe that we can build deeply functional one-size-fits-all systems on a national scale. This is like deja vu all over again, really. The Lorenzo program, which Joe was the Chief Clinical Information Officer for at the time, under NPFIT was a classic example, an attempt to integrate everything from acute primary care, community services, and mental health. If it's a big system across the country, it has to be very thin in terms of functionality. My example there is NHS Login. That's a great piece of work. We should do more of that kind of thing. Politics gets in the way of everything. Minister with an idea is dangerous. Famous quote, Prime Minister with an idea, absolutely terrifying. If the scope becomes large and political, the delivery becomes unrealistic. Engagement with users becomes tokenistic. Clinicians will quickly see when decisions are being made centrally without their input. And we must recognize that. I got a quote off a guy that most of you will know, but I won't mention him by name, but nodding is not agreement. So just because you don't hear dissent among the rank and file does not mean people are on board with the program. So kind of to finish, and I Googled, you know, I didn't want to just stand here like Nigel Farage and moan and have no future for you. So I was thinking about what it would be, you know, what we want. And I Googled freedom, and that, unfortunately, is the most awful kind of outdated cultural reference I could find. Not even a good film, my view. But what can we do in the future? And I think that the future does lie in data ownership and interoperability. Actually, it has to. We have to deploy, actually start to work with some of the standards we've talked about, not just talk about them. So FHIR, Open EHR, the chance to build clinical data repositories, using open source technologies wherever we can. I'm not an evangelist. I know people who are, but we definitely don't make enough use of that technology in our workspace. We need the freedom to move from one system to another. We need the freedom to build personal health records that don't lock the patient into your EPR vendor, which has been the direction of travel, actually. We need to stop that. And we need to innovate without waiting for our suppliers. If we don't deploy open standards, that will not happen. And we have to get at least some of this into our business cases and our design. And we have to stick with it and not let that be the first thing that drops out of the business case. So this is my last slide. And I got this off the CIO for London, Luke Redman. But there's a slogan that they created, which is systems will be useful, usable, and will be used. So we have to bear in mind that we do not deliver these kind of systems that, as I said at the very beginning, turn our doctors into data entry clerks. Although I actually think that music preference is an important data item in the patient record, but that's once again just my opinion. So, and in the end, if we don't, suppliers will continue to dictate terms, and we will be having the same conversation again in another 10 years. And if you feel that you read the 10-year plan about 20 years ago, like I did, then that's probably enough reason to worry about it and actually do something about it right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was a bit rushed.
Oh, no worries. I'm going to invite up Hamza Qadri now. I don't have a brief on him. I just met him a moment ago. But he's doing something which is very close to my heart, which is looking at conversation. So I'm going to hand over, Hamza. Floor's yours. I'll give you a shout at 2 minutes to 10 minutes after you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hamza. I'm one of the resident doctors at the Great Western Hospital in Swindon. Honored to be here in an esteemed company of esteemed accomplished individuals. My sort of interest in digital health sort of only picked up over the course of past year, and thanks for Mark's significant involvement in that. So I'll jump right into it. It's a very basic project that we worked on, but something that will have some interest for everyone. So I'll start with a sort of a scenario where I want you to look at it from the lens of a resident doctor. So basically, you've had your morning round with your consultant. He's gone. You've gone for your lunch afterwards. Sorry, let me just move. Yeah. So you've had your lunch. You go back to the ward. You've got your list of jobs to do, and your consultant asked you to check on Mr. Smith's blood results. Mr. Smith has gotten admitted with sepsis, and what you're probably looking for in the blood results is something like whether he's got, whether the antibiotics you've given, are they working? Are the inflammatory markers improving? Or have they picked up an AKI? Anything like that. You look at the blood results, and what you find is they've got deranged LFTs. You looked into the drug chart, and you're thinking, what could be causing this? Maybe it's statins. Probably not. They've been on statins for a year. And what else? Probably antibiotics. Do we stop that? Probably not, because they've got sepsis. You ring your consultant, can't get through. what do you do? And this is where we started to think about, that sort of gap that can come up in the life of almost every resident doctor, where you're looking out for a bit of guidance, and which is not immediately available. And then we thought about to what extent can artificial intelligence really address that gap. So, and that was basically what we picked up on, that could AI be the new pocketbook of medicine, as we used to have Oxford handbooks, and we still have them, but a lot of people now prefer to use cell phones. But could it really be a replacement for the pocketbook of medicine for resident doctors? Very simple project that we did. We picked up about 20 ward-based clinical cases, similar to the one that I mentioned, wrote it in the form of prompts. I will give you an example going forwards. And then we involved 3 independent general medicine consultants to whom we sent the prompts via email. And we used the same prompts with the ChatGPT, or basically the GPT-5 model. Either it was Copilot or ChatGPT. We gave it the same prompt, and then we had about 8 resident doctors who looked at the responses from ChatGPT or GPT-5 and rated it again across 4 domains. 4 domains, namely, you've got usefulness. So how useful, how practically applicable were the responses? You've got clarity, how clear are the responses? Can you really understand what it's saying? And the 2 big ones, safety and accuracy. Right, so this is one of the examples. Resident doctors are mostly always worried about not giving enough information to the consultant to get a decision. So a lot of them were quite wordy. I've picked up one of the brief ones. But one of the things that we found really interesting, that AI was really good at summarizing all that information in a very succinct way. And this is what's going on here, where you've got a 58-year-old female with type 2 diabetes who's on metformin. And she's got slightly low tracking blood sugars while she's in the hospital. And the question the resident doctor wants to know is whether there is any need to make any changes to the medication. And here we've got a basic summary of the answer. No medication change is needed because metformin doesn't tend to cause hypoglycemia. And that's what the consultants agreed with. And that was one of the simple questions. Coming up to some results. So this is one of those things that we found. We weren't really looking into this, but once we collated the results, we realized this was very interesting. So out of the 3 consultants that we collected the data from, they only agreed about 35% of the time, so about 7 cases out of 20. 55% of the times, or 11 cases out of 20, they agreed partially. So two consultants agreed, and one had a different answer. And then 2 cases out of 20, they did not agree at all. So all 3 consultants had a different opinion. Now the results on the GPT-5 performance, I'll let you decide. But basically what you're getting here is, for usefulness, you're getting 4.4 out of 5. This is 8 resident doctors rating all the answers. You've got clarity rating of 4.4 out of 5, safety 4.5 out of 5, and accuracy of 4.5 out of 5. Whether that's good enough, I'll leave that to you guys. Here's another case. We've got an 84-year-old who's gotten admitted with shortness of breath, new oxygen requirement. He's being treated for hospital-acquired pneumonia. He's had recent multiple admissions with chest infections, delirium, bless him, and was only discharged 10 days ago. He's known to have severe COPD. You started IV antibiotics. He's on his regular inhalers. He's got high inflammatory markers, consistent with an infection. And on the examination findings, you find out that he's got some reduced breath sounds and mild bibasal cramps, but no wheeze. And the question the resident doctor wants to know is whether this patient needs oral steroids, given that he's got a background of significant COPD. And the answer comes from the AI, which was yes. And what it feels that because of the worsening breathlessness and the oxygen requirement, the model decides to treat it as acute exacerbation, and he goes ahead with that. But the answer that we get from the consultants was absolutely not. And the main thing that they point out is that there's no wheeze and there's no reason for us to start the poor elderly gentleman on steroids. That was one case out of the 20 where potentially, thank you, potentially sort of had an unsafe response. Moving on, that's another case. This time I decided to use the AI summary. So this is someone who's got elderly female, 80 years old, quite unwell, has got pancytopenia, sepsis, has grown candida in urine. And the question the resident doctor wants to know is whether we should be treating with oral fluconazole, which is an antifungal, keeping in mind that this patient has got pancytopenia. And this is where, to an extent, AI sort of scored brownie points, where it's really good at structuring the answer, putting that into sort of into context, and helping you think it through. Whereas obviously in a clinical in a ward round of 20 patients, you're probably not going to be able to deconstruct that question in that sort of manner. So you've got all the reasons to treat with fluconazole, reasons to be cautious about, and then you also have a conclusion. Another interesting point here is, yes, it gave you an answer. It was very clear about it, gave it in a structured way. And fair enough, blood counts to monitor and liver function, which you would probably do anyways because they're being monitored for sepsis. But then it tries to involve all the specialties under the sun, which you would often come across, where it's trying to involve other specialties and sort of covering its backside. Moving on, this is sort of a basic summary of the qualitative feedback that the resident doctors felt. They found that it's probably not going to be very grumpy when you call it in the middle of night at 3 a.m. in a busy night shift. It's very structured, and it's not going to give you an eye roll when you ask a stupid question. It can potentially hallucinate, although I've noted that it's significantly improved over the past few models, and it can provide excessive detail at times where we don't have time to cover all of that. Can lack a clear conclusion and does not necessarily ask for follow-up questions, which your consultant might easily be able to walk you through. A lot more needs to be done. This was very basic. This was proof of concept overall. We need more data, multiple specialties, different acuity settings, emergency department, something like ITU settings, and seeing how well it does. Obviously, rating-wise, it was all very subjective. An FY1 doctor will have a different usefulness rating for a response compared to a registrar, and so that's everything to keep in mind going forward. Overall, that's the general idea. That was our feeling that probably nowhere near replacing any of the consultants, but absolutely could provide a level of support and serve as a valuable adjunct for decision support, especially when support is not available. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Hamza. That sets my presentation at the end of day before you all have a nap before dinner. Although I'm looking to see where we can nap here. I'm a fond one for a siesta. Last, we have Max Hughes, a pharmacist turned digital health leader. Currently working in clinical informatics and digital transformation. He's been bridging the world of pharmacy and system design, navigating how new technology works in everyday clinical workflows. I love the fact that his LinkedIn profile is very concise and to the point, a bit like my website. And I think that he'll bring us a view from frontline. So, Max, please.
Thank you.
I'll give you a shout at 8 minutes. Yeah.
Sorry. So, let's got the right slide up. It looks a bit different. Doesn't matter. I'll do most of the talking anyway. So, my name is Max. I'm a clinical pharmacist by background, and yeah, that's the page. Sorry. So yeah, clinical pharmacist by background. I worked in the NHS for a little over 10 years. Very passionate about digital technology. Generally speaking, I'd consider myself a bit of a geek. One of those people who's got, built gaming computers, has a couple of 4U servers in a rack in his office, and likes to mess around with, everything all the time. Really, I'm a bit of a generalist. I love getting involved in everything. It never really hurts to broaden your knowledge base. I'm nosy. I like to stick my face in everywhere I can. And recently, so the last 12 months, I've moved over to working independently in sort of digital healthcare consultancy. So mainly working with trusts, doing things like EPR deployments, EPMA systems, things like that. Really, it probably stems from sort of 10 years ago when I first started working on wards. You'd be there reviewing patients. Everything was paper notes, paper prescriptions. Everything was a mess. You'd pick up a folder and everything would fall out, and then that was a nightmare. Everything was all in siloed systems, and the processes that you had to follow were always horrible and inefficient and slow. And I hated it. So I always could see that obviously there's a much better way for all this to work. I didn't understand what needed to be done, but I knew that there was a better way. And in the back of my head, I always said that if there's not something better in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe I should go and work somewhere where I can actually make a difference and make this happen. So, that was sort of my background. Quick summary of my journey. Yeah, formatting's definitely gone weird. Don't know why. Started off, obviously, do your undergraduate, master pharmacy. And really, obviously, one of the main focuses of sort of this conference is around digital education. There was no digital education really in the undergraduate for there. Started my first sort of clinical posts as rotational and specialist pharmacist. And while there, you started to want to try and make changes, but you didn't know where to start, how to do it, what to do. So what I generally see happening is what definitely happened with me was started playing with spreadsheets and making, over-the-top complicated spreadsheets with lots of macros and lots of functionality that should never really be used for production, patient-facing stuff, but, everyone does it. I think before I then moved on to my role as my first proper digital role as an electronic prescribing pharmacist, started trying to see what you could do to make a difference. So I was working on an acute frailty ward for a while, and there was no electronic dashboard on that ward. We were really keen to try and make sure we were on top of the patients, seeing them as quickly as possible, trying to get the turnaround, trying to get them out of being in hospital, trying to treat them at home where we could. But it was really hard to try and keep track of everyone. So built a nice little ward dashboard in Excel. My job in the morning was to go in, copy and paste / write all the patient information in, because obviously all the patients changed a couple of times a day. So stick all that in, but at least when that was done, me and the pharmacy technician who worked on the ward could try and have an overview of the ward. You could tick off who'd been seen, see when the med rec had done, if there was a discharge waiting to be done, and highlight things in different colours. And it was there as a tool to try and help us be more efficient. Downside being that it wasn't great because there was a lot of manual process involved. Patients moved, and you had to know that they moved to remember to update your spreadsheet. It was an old spreadsheet. It's not like Office 365 now, so there's no multi users in a spreadsheet, so it didn't really get shared very well. But the intention was there, the drive was there. We knew that there was something that could be better done. The same trust I was working at the time as well actually was just sort of starting their pilot rollout of electronic prescribing. So I tried my hardest to keep on sticking my nose in there, but there was people on that project doing that job already. So wasn't something I could get formally involved in, but I would obviously always ask questions and try and cause trouble. And then as soon as the job came up for actually a senior pharmacist in electronic prescribing, jumped at it. That's really sort of where I properly started in the digital workflow. So where I could start understanding the wider context of, how everything works, what needs to be done, and sort of go from there. Really, essentially, you can see a quick summary of, what you would probably expect for the types of job roles you might move through and the types of formal education that's there. But what's definitely not covered is all the sort of personal development and non-formal learning that's really required around this to help you develop and progress into those sort of careers. And that's where this is a quick summary of. This is off the top of my head, a handful of things that are not formally taught anywhere, but are really useful in understanding. So, understanding the governance structures in the trust, what is at board level, what's sub-board level, how does your clinical design committee work, how does drugs and therapeutics work, how does everything interplay and move around? Because understanding basics like that is really important for, well, can you just add this drug or an order set to a system? Well, no, the drug hasn't been approved yet. It needs to go through the nice pathway first, and then it needs to do this. And then understanding that, everything sort of starts to mesh. Understanding change control processes, understanding how that sort of flows, information governance, who is a CSIRO, what is an information asset register, who's an asset owner, how does all that interplay and work together? Databases, SQL, things like that. Not something you would necessarily have as part of your core job, but having a good understanding of it is really, really beneficial. Essentially, I see everything as just a database with a nice layer on top that then pulls that and gives it to you. So, understanding the different types of data and how databases work, I find it really useful. And when you get really weird behavior and things as well, like, oh, I can only type 254 characters in this box. Wonder why that is. You start to know a bit later on. Linking into that, things like business intelligence and, starting to understand how can you take data and make it into something that's actually operationally and clinically useful. Your risk management processes, when a data comes in or there's an incident, how does that flow around the whole wider system in the trust? And specifically, how does that impact on clinical systems? Then you start to look at things like your clinical safety case and clinical safety officer and what regulations there are around that. Finances, how do things work for, making sure we have proper clinical coding in the system. No one hates trying to find, you're doing a differential diagnosis for a patient and trying to put down, why you think they've come in. If you've got a proper search term in there that's actually looking up the SNOMED terms, they're horrible. You want to look for diabetes, and there's 27 diabetes. They're not very user-friendly. But, having really well-coded clinical information in the system is incredibly important, because not only is it, good from a finance point of view, because you get more money as long as you've properly coded everything, it also then is your knock-on effects down the line, where actually once you've got good clinical coded data, you can start to do clever things with your data analysis and AI and things like that. You want to generate a quick list of all the diabetic patients so that the diabetes nurses can do a quick ward round and see all the potentially patients that have not been prescribed their insulin on a mission. I could probably waffle on here for a long time, so I won't do. But again, interoperability is a big one. Understanding things about how do systems actually talk to each other. What is a HL7 message? What is FHIR? All this type of stuff. It's incredibly useful because everything builds on top of each other. Everything's connected. If you understand that systems need to talk to each other in a standard way, you start to understand why is this drug written out in this certain way. Well, that's using a DMD standard, and that's been built this way for a certain reason, and it all sort of make more sense. Software development life cycles. I think that's software deployments actually, but software deployments, that's really useful to know as well for things like, okay, when something actually being deployed at the trust, how's that going to roll out everywhere? What type of devices does it work on? When I was at the North West Ambulance Service, originally their EPR was a Windows-based application, and they all had sort of Windows-based tablets that they went out for when they were on the road. When there's some funding that became available and bought thousands of iPads for frontline clinical staff, well, a Windows-based application is obviously never going to run on that. So, the EPR is actually being redeveloped as a progressive web app and being redeveloped, and understanding how things actually get deployed and moved around is really useful. I'll try and skip ahead because I'll talk along. Process mapping, process design. There's no point just making existing processes digital. It just fails. Making sure you understand how to map existing processes means you can actually design your future processes much better. Again, understanding things like RPA. RPA is wonderful, it's amazing. Used it here and there sparingly. In my opinion, it's always a last resort. We should have proper interoperability in systems to talk to each other. But if your last resort is a person has to move that bit of information from there to there, well, can we make that person electronic instead? At least use standard logic and standard business processes and optimize where we can. Project management, coding, analytics, legislation, that's probably really important. So much legislation around, around the Health and Social Care Act, medicines legislation, how the trust actually gets funded around the NHS standard contract. It's all really important because it all sorts of linked together about why things are done in the ways they are. And really, I think all this is a massive gap that's not really covered. I think people just learn this as they progress through their career in the NHS. Depending on what your job role is and what opportunities come up, you sort of start to find more things. So really, a couple of quick lessons learned really for me is that there's a bit of a lack of opportunity sometimes for clinical staff to get to work in digital. It's quite limited. There's a lack of standardization in the roles that do exist. So, exactly the same job role description between multiple different trusts, that person would be doing vastly different things. When I was an EPMA pharmacist, we were building some quite innovative first of type stuff. We were building some medicines interoperability between two of our systems. Happened to be hands-on looking at SQL queries and interface messages and doing some quite fun stuff. That's not the role of an EPA pharmacist at most of the trusts, but that happened to be where we had the ability to do it, and that actually worked out really well for us. And again, there's not great learning development pathways. We've got some fantastic stuff. We've got the Digital Academy, we've got Topo Fellowships. There's a few things out there, but they tend to be aimed at a higher level and they don't cover a whole bunch of other stuff that exists on there. So really, I think where you can find modular training, that's going to be really important. We don't really have a lot of sort of modular domain-specific training. So, okay, I want to understand about EPMA and prescribing medicines. I want to understand about EPRs. I want to understand what is a PAS system in radiology. You might want modules around more technical things. So, for pharmacy example, a lot of us understand that there is a DMND, which is a National Dictionary of Medicines. We understand it's there, but if you want to actually physically use that in some meaningful way to help you do your job, you have to know how to open an XML file, parse that, make that into some sort of usable format within an Excel or a database, and that's not going to be taught anywhere. So unless someone can do it for you, where do you learn that? That's a very technical bit of information that's not easily made available to people. Because I'm nosy, I enjoy going off and learning all sorts of nonsense. But I think one thing that we need to make sure we do a better job of is sharing freely. Make sure we just sort of, any information that you do have, pass it along, show people, share. Why not? There's no point reinventing the wheel. Be curious, take every opportunity you can to ask people to, why do we do this? How do you do that? And yeah, broaden your knowledge base. There's never anything wrong with knowing more stuff. And be passionate about what you do. If you enjoy experimenting and learning new things, then you'll enjoy doing it and you'll keep on doing it. Experiment at home, try things out, show them to peers, get some feedback. And then just the last little thing is, that there is still lots of good digital innovation going on the front line. A quick handful of things that we've, done in my time there was, building some, first of type interoperability system between our EPMA and Pharmacist stock system. Learned an awful lot of stuff in that project. Local innovations. So we built some electronic referrals during COVID because, we had staff wandering from wards down to pharmacy to hand in bits of paper or to bring a prescription chart down and, things like that. So we built some referrals and messaging systems, just ad hoc, just to remove that movement of patients and staff and paper where we could, bits of process automation, electronic referrals, single points of access to shared care records. There's, we are doing stuff. There's a long way to go, but there is a lot that can be done. So, yeah, ask me any questions if you like. Sorry, that was a bit stop.
Thank you very much, Max. Excellent. Yeah. Please stay here. Adrian and Hamza, would you like to rejoin us on the stage? We have enough time for a couple of questions. We have a question over here. Who's got a microphone? Shall I grab a microphone? There you go. Lovely. While I hand it over, I'd just like to say how interesting it was to get, please say who you are, where you're from.
So I'm Asif Sharma, respiratory consultant, at South Tyneside in Sunderland, here as Deputy CCAO and CSO. There's some questions and comment for Hamza. So first of all, well done for coming out to speak in front of such a large and mixed audience. I'm sure it's probably one of the first experiences for you like this, so really well done. I'm glad that my job is not at risk yet, although it would be nice if I didn't have to be woken up at 3 in the morning when I'm on call. And yes, I agree, I wouldn't have given steroids to that patient either. My question is, did your consultants agree that what ChatGPT-5 said in those clinical scenarios is what they would have done for those patients under their care? Because it's probably less about doing the right thing and more about doing what your consultant wants.
Okay. So these were sort of live clinical scenarios that did come up, and we actioned out those treatment. We carried out those treatments for the patients. So these were practical examples where we implemented what we asked the consultants. One of those consultants was always the responsible clinician for the patient. So we were acting out these treatments. Sorry, did I catch that right? So no, yeah. So it was quite. So the accuracy bit. What we did was we took the consultant answers as the gold standard. So majority consultant consensus. We took that as the accuracy sort of gold standard, and then for the rest of them, they were rated by resident doctor themselves. Yeah.
More question? Ready?
Thank you for the presence. I actually have one question, quick one from each of you. So for Adrian, which I love your title, SAM, Professional Cynic. My name is Marjorie. I'm an associate professor at Sheffield Hallam University, and my area of work is ethical artificial intelligence. And one of the things that is very prevalent in the UK, so I'm from Brazil, so I came from a different higher educational system, is that here everybody seems to think that off-the-shelf solution is always the best. So how can we fight that, since what you were advocating was to home design and bespoke solutions? So that's for you. For Hamza, well done for your presentation. I was wondering if anyone sense checked the summarization from the large language model. One of the things that I hear a lot from GPs back in Sheffield, which is my basis, is that the summarization tools they are being asked to use are rubbish. So they basically spend longer redoing the summarization from what they recollect rather than trusting it. And then for Max, what would you have done differently? So based on your journey, if you could change something back at some point, what would you have done?
We have sort of negative time to answer all the questions. So
should I go first? I don't know.
Adrian, could you answer in 30 seconds?
Yeah. So I spent years sort of in that environment you just spoken about, which is the tension between buying something that is fit for the market, which is kind of a vanilla product, versus things that might be more bespoke for your local user base. And you have to admit that there's always going to be a tension between that. If you build something over many years, you end up with a real legacy of development that you have to keep up to date technically, plus building on new requirements all the time. Even multi-million-pound developer companies don't have the time to redevelop their products adequately, never mind if you're doing it yourself. So it will always be a tension. And I think you just have to try and hit the right space. You have to not go bespoke in every little use case that you find. It's not worth spending hundreds of developer days for half a dozen users to use a couple of hours a week. So you've got to make some of those kind of decisions. I think we were always waiting for something better to come along in the market, actually, largely. Even now, there's not many products in the market that I would choose to buy, I've got to admit. That's the short answer. If you want the long one, talk to me at the bar.
Yeah, true. I think, Hamza, I think maybe you had a yes/no answer possible for the question.
From what we went is basically the resident doctor summary in itself. I mean, I don't think it was a lot for the GPT-5 to summarize. It did pick up the right key bits of information and what it took the decision on. So I think in our case it was pretty much okay.
I might touch on summarization a bit later when I do my talk. Max, last thought before more coffee?
That stands out as something that I would have always wanted to do differently, mainly because, yes, there are things that in hindsight you would do differently, but if I hadn't done it that way first, I wouldn't have learned. So, you know, the way something was built or developed or a process that we did, it made sense at the time, that's what we thought was right, and now in retrospect, there's better ways to do things. But, you know, everything's a learning aspect, really. So, I mean, the only thing I'd probably look at doing more is just trying not to overstretch yourself, because I tend to go all over the place. Don't stretch yourself too far, and be careful you don't burn yourself out, because that's very easy to do in all of our work. Working digital, clinical, anywhere where you are, we're all very stretched. So look after yourself and look after the people you're working with, support each other.
Great stuff. So hands on and minds on. I think this has been a great panel. Please give them a round of applause.